Unlike the 2024 NBA draft, the 2025 has a consensus number 1 pick. If you haven't heard of him, his name is Cooper Flagg. He's 6'9", and he's the best defensive prospect in high school right now. He can essentially do it all. For those old school fans out there, old school Utah Jazz fans, on a podcast, I've heard this guy compared to Andre Kirilenko. I've also heard as high of praise as Larry Bird. If you haven't watched him play, he's a lot of fun to watch. Doc D and I have been scouting him a little bit this year just to get a better look at him, and he's very special. At the Nike Peach Jam this year, it's a basketball tournament featuring the best high school basketball prospects across the country. He had 3 games, a 3-game stint where he dropped 3 straight triple doubles and recorded a whopping 104 points, 48 rebounds, and 32 blocks in those 3 games. So makes sense why he's a number 1 pick, and he'll be committing to Duke. And we've heard a lot of talk from Utah Jazz fans and maybe some analysts out there that the Utah Jazz are going to be trying to get this guy in 2025. In order to do so, we've also heard that a potential good idea is to convey their 2024 draft pick, so this year's draft pick, to Oklahoma City, so they don't have to worry about giving it up in 2025 or the 2026 drafts. For those of you that don't know, we pawned off Derek Favors a few years ago to OKC, which gave them the rights to this year's pick, or next year's, or the year after. How it essentially works is that if the Jazz land in the bottom 10 this year, or picks 1 through 10, then they get to keep their pick. But if it falls 11 through 30, OKC gets the pick. Then the pick gets pushed, if the Utah Jazz keep the pick, into 2025 with that same top 10 protection, so it happens again. In 2026, the selection becomes top 8 protected if it's still not paid off or given to OKC. One of the huge kickers or caveats here is in 2026, the Utah Jazz start to reap some rewards from the Cleveland Cavaliers and Minnesota Timberwolves with the Rudy Gobert picks and the Donovan Mitchell picks. One of the main kickers here, though, is if it falls between 9 and 30, and we have held on to our 2024 and 25, OKC gets the rights to either the Cavs or the Timberwolves pick, whichever is better. So there's a little bit of a dilemma here with the Utah Jazz. We've heard some reports based off of, we've heard Shams, we've heard some other people, Jake Fisher, The Athletic, talking about how Donovan Mitchell is not too happy in Cleveland. And, these things can vary, but you never know. We've been hearing that in Utah years ago, hearing that now with the Cavs, that maybe when his contract expires, he goes and looks somewhere else. So that 2026 pick could be very special. And something that we really need to consider is there might be merit to the fact that the Jazz should convey their 2024 pick. All right, Doc. So is there a chance that the Jazz can go and get this number 1 consensus pick, Cooper Flagg?
Sure. Yeah, there's a chance, but it's very minimal. Even if they have the worst record in the NBA, what does that give you, like a 12% chance, right? It's
something like that, yeah.
I mean, what happened to Detroit last year? Detroit was the worst team in the NBA, and they got like the 5th pick. So yeah, sure, there's a chance. It's super minimal, especially because you have players like Lauri Markkanen. I just don't believe that the Jazz would be bad enough to bottom out, especially under Will Hardy. He's a very competitive coach. He wants to win. But I don't think it's likely. I don't think that the Jazz are going to get Cooper Flagg. However, I think it really would be best if we just got this pick out of the way and conveyed it. That way we can focus on the 2025 class, which, according to Sam Victine, who's a great NBA draft analyst, like that's a loaded class. So I would much rather have 3 picks in that year than the one we have this year. We already have picks anyways. I think we have pick 28 and then 33 sitting currently.
So you would prioritize, because there's some likely scenarios here. If the Jazz finish, 11 through 13, 14, they're likely probably to finish around there, or maybe 10, 9, or 8 or something like that. That pick, getting the 10th, 9th, or 8th pick is not as valuable as getting a pick outside of the top 10 next year. Do you think that?
I think that we have 3 draft picks that we will have next year in a much more talent-saturated class. And I think that while there are good players, like this year's draft, I think is kind of underrated. I think we both feel that way. Jacoby Walter is fantastic. Alexandre Sarr is great. Zachary Rochier, I believe I'm saying that right. Cody Williams is the best player in college basketball currently right now. There are good players. Plus Kyle Filipowski. We were high on him last year, and he's going to be a definite lottery lock this year. There are good players in this draft. There are going to be good players in every draft. I just think that if you're looking for raw skills and a more talent-saturated class, yeah, of course. Look what happened in 2023. That was a very, very talent-heavy draft. We know that. And look who we got at 16. We got Keontae George, right? He's most likely going to be our lead guard of the future. He just had a phenomenal night, honestly, against the Heat. We just talked about that earlier. But and then we have Taylor Hendricks, who doesn't look bad. Bryce Sensabaugh looks like to be a pretty consistent shooter, which we like, coming off the bench for us. I would love to get 3 more players like that than one player who might or might not develop into a star.
Well, I think the Jazz, so if they have 3 picks next year, but if one of them is taken to OKC, we would still have 2 picks, right?
Yes.
So I think that we should try and keep this pick this year. It seems like we're already pretty bad. We're already hovering around 10. So we might as well try and get that pick, see if this guy pans out. We'll still have other picks. And to be honest, we're likely not going to be the best next year either. These guys are still going to be further developing. You've got people like Keontae George, Taylor Hendricks, Sensabaugh might be seeing more time. So those are 3 guys who are going into their second year who are still developing. They're still going to be making mistakes. Right. So the Jazz are still probably going to fall and not do super well. I think what it would boil down to is if you value having something like the 13th or 14th pick, which is where we might land next year, versus not having it and maybe trying to get the pick this year. There's a chance as well that we might just be bad both years and have 2 top 10 picks. And
yeah, I was about to say, I don't even know if it's a choice at this point.
Yeah. I think the kicker here, Doc, I feel like the kicker here is a lot of people are getting their hopes high on Cooper Flagg, and I just do not see that happening. I mean, we know that Ainge, or if you guys don't know, Ainge was scouting him. He's gone to some of Cooper Flagg's games. I'm sure he has interest in him, but every NBA team has interest. We do have a lot of draft capital, but I think you would probably have to be 5th or 6th pick, throw in a ton of draft picks to try and get him. And I don't even know if the number 1 team would be willing to give him up. This is a guy who's been consensus number 1 in 2025 for a few years. He looks very special. I don't even know if there's 4 or 5 first rounds are going to get you that number 1 pick, unless you have the 3rd or 4th pick. But there are so many bad teams. I mean, Washington Wizards are bad right now. Detroit.
The only way the Utah Jazz, I don't mean to cut you off. The only way the Utah Jazz could get Cooper Flagg would be, at least in my opinion, they would have to trade Larry Marketing. You would either have to trade him so you could not be good whatsoever.
Yep. Yeah.
or he would have to be in the package trying to get that number 1 pick. Like, I don't see any other way they could be that bad, because Lowry is that good. And while he isn't like transcendent, he's definitely a top 5 like shooting forward in this league. When he plays at that position like he did last year, he was an albatross. He was murdering dudes. They moved him to power forward, and he's still playing well, but I think that you really unlock his abilities when you put him at the 3 and you let him do his thing. You would have to trade him, man. You have to. That's like the only way the Jazz are going to get Cooper Flagg.
It's a definite dilemma here.
Yeah, well, like the Utah Jazz too, as a franchise, they've never had the number 1 pick ever in our franchise history. So I don't know. It would be nice, but we would have to be so bad. I just don't think we'll be able to get there.
Another thing too, Doc, is there are some other guys who have shown prowess and talent that will be coming in that 2025 NBA draft, like Ace Bailey, a few other guys. But I think the reality, like you
Dylan Harper too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's Wagner. Wagner too is coming out of that draft, right? He's pretty good.
I think so.
Yeah, you look into that. But I think what the point I want to make here is even the worst drafts have extremely special players. And there could be, in this 2025 draft, maybe the players land later, outside the lottery. That happens as well. Maybe it is very top heavy, and maybe we would never even have a chance to getting the 2nd or 3rd pick in the draft. I just think that we got to take what we can get. And if we're getting a top 10 pick this year, there are some nice guys. Like you had mentioned, Jacoby Walter. I like Jacoby Walter. I think that
I love Jacoby.
He looks like he's pretty good. I think that he started off very strong. He's kind of fallen off a bit, but we saw a little bit of that from Keontae George. Keontae started off really strong. He was as high as 7th in a lot of mock drafts, and then he fell all the way to 16th. And I think the guy's going to finish first team all rookie, and he's going to be special.
Oh, for sure. He's leading all rookies right now. I checked this. I need to update this stat, actually. I might be wrong on this. But I checked a few nights ago, and he was leading all the rookies this year in assists. Everyone.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's Jacoby Walter right now?
No, that's Keontae George.
Oh, Keontae. He's beating out Scoot now.
Yeah. Yeah, he has more assists total than any other rookie.
Oh yeah, I did know that.
Yeah, he's and like he just set a record in the NBA too as a rookie. Point is, Baylor always picks good guards. They know their guards really well. And Jacoby Walter, man, I think he would be a great number 2 option next to Keontae George. I would love to see that. He's big too. He's 6'5", has kind of the same body as Ochai, but he can score, where Ochai just offensively did not put the production down for us the way we wanted him to. He would be great. He'd be great for us. But like, I just don't know if we're going to get that top 10 pick. Like right now we're sitting at 11. We would have to lose so many more games.
Well, it's pretty close. I don't think we're going to be hitting like the 6th or 7th, but I think there's a legitimate chance that the Jazz could land 8th, 9th, or 10th. I think we're pretty close, neck and neck with Atlanta. I think they have the 10th pick, if I'm not mistaken, and we're not too far off from the others. But I do think that there's a chance we land
Houston too. I think we're half a game ahead of Houston.
Yeah, it's Houston, Atlanta. We're all kind of close.
I mean, there is a world where they do get that top 10 pick, but then like, are you going to be okay with, getting that? And then what happens in 2025? Like, we're going to give up our pick in a more saturated class. What happens if we get, because it's top 8 protected next year.
Top 10.
Top 10.
That's 26.
Okay. So what happens if we're around the same position as we are now, which we probably would be too. Yeah.
You have to value, and that's what I'm saying, Doc. You have to value 12th versus 10th or 9th. This year's 9th or 10th versus next year's 11th or 12th potentially.
I mean, if we're going to get a player like Keontae George in 2025, which with a more loaded and saturated class, I'd go with that.
But you never know, right? It's always...
You're right. We don't know.
Determine.
It is. That's why we speculate.
Well,
but personally,
they're building.
I know that Will Hardy has shown that he's going to continue to compete. I don't know what you can really ask more of a coach in his second season who's 35 years old, second youngest coach in the NBA. Like, there's going to be growing pains. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
We've always known that. It is, like, it is what it is. Like, this team is still fun to watch and they're competitive. And at the end of the day, personally, I would want to just get that pick off the books so you don't have to worry about it in 2025 or 2026. You don't want to lose your pick swap rights in 2026. If you don't convey that pick, that's going to happen to us. And that could be the year Donovan Mitchell walks from the Cavs as a free agent. So why wouldn't you want to have the swap rights with them? Plus, we don't really know what Minnesota is going to be like. They're trying to keep this core together, and they did a great job in retaining Mike Conley. Which shows as well that this front office, they're okay with just paying to keep their players. I respect that. I love that. They're well over the luxury, and like, they're paying for Mike Conley, literally. Like, whew, oh boy. But he brought a good center and presence to your team. So, but there are going to be decisions they have to make later. Karl Anthony Towns is a max player. Rudy Gobert is a max player. And Anthony Edwards is going to be a max player. There's no way you can have, at least in the constructed CBA, 3 max players on a roster. There's no way you can do that anymore. You wouldn't have enough to pay the rest of your players.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of teams that might fall into that dilemma. But
yeah, I mean, max is 40% of your salary cap. It would take you to 120 with 3 players. Like, you can't do it. Yeah, you can't do it. With 2, it's insane. It's 80% of your salary is gone. Yeah. Man.
I think circling back, I think we might differ on this opinion, because I think it might be a good idea to try and keep that pick. I know a lot of people, and we both agree on this, a lot of people have mentioned that this draft class is pretty weak, but I think there's always talent. It's kind of underrated. And I've looked at the guys that, that might fall 8th, 9th, or 10th, and there's some real talent that could be had. And so I think you got to take what you can get. And in 2026, if that falls around and Donovan does end up leaving, we still have pick swaps for the upcoming years, with the Cavs.
True.
So it's not the worst thing. It's not the end of the world. And not only that, the Cavs could still be pretty good, even without Donovan Mitchell. We've seen Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley all have really good performances. So they still could be pretty decent. It'd be like, maybe this is hypothetical, speculative, but at worst, I'm not thinking it's like a 5th or 6th pick. I'm thinking that it's like a lottery pick, like maybe 13th, 14th at worst. Like, they're still a pretty decent team, in my opinion, even without Donovan. And if Donovan gets traded,
what do you classify as decent
back?
Because they couldn't make the playoffs without Donovan Mitchell? Like,
that's true.
Joined their team, they were making the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs again this year. Like, but Donovan is that kind of player. Without him,
great.
They couldn't make the playoffs. They were fighting.
Are we acting like we're going to get like a top 5 pick if Donovan Mitchell walks? Because I don't think that's the case.
I don't know, because I don't think that team is that good without him.
They're not, for sure, but I don't think that they're like a top 10, bottom 10, where they'd be giving that in a pick swap. And this is all hypothetical. We're just assuming
they're not
that
making
Donovan's
the playoffs without Donovan at all. And like, I don't think that they are.
Maybe.
Let's see. I think they could be a bottom 10 team. I really do. When I think about
I don't know. Maybe you're right.
Well, because like they have Toronto. Toronto would be better than them. Let's see, the Hawks. I think the Hawks beat them in a play-in tournament. Who else? Who else is bottom feeding right now in the East?
Toronto's not looking.
They're better than Charlotte. That's wonderful. And they're better than Washington and Detroit. I don't know if they're better than Toronto or Brooklyn or Atlanta. I don't think they beat either of those teams. They would suck without Donovan Mitchell. That's just the truth.
It's going to be interesting. I think these next upcoming years, there's going to be a lot of nail biting maybe on the Utah Jazz side, trying to see if they can keep their picks or if they just end up giving the pick this year. Hopefully that guy doesn't turn into some type of star.
I mean, I think it's out of their hands now. We both agree on that, though. Like, I think that they're going to get the pick this year. While they've been competitive, they have not been able to recover from the trade deadline. That's just the truth. Like, Kelly Olynyk proved to be one of the best facilitators we have in terms of offense on the team. And you can see that it's glaringly painful right now. And Ochai gave us a lot of defense on the perimeter and was a hustler and one of our better defenders. And now that he's gone, that's also very visible. And we didn't really get anything back for them. We waived one player. We're buying out Michael Porter Jr. or Otto Porter Jr. And then we haven't even tried to play. I don't even know who those players are, JD. That's the thing. We don't even know who those players are because they're just not even relevant to what the team is doing moving forward. Do you know what I mean? So we didn't really get anything back whatsoever. And I love this team and we're competitive, but right now it's hard to fill those voids with the roster we have right now, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Will Hardy's doing his best. I think the more you play, I would play Chris Dunn a lot more for sure. You have to now. I can't wait for Walker Kessler to come back. But this is what we got. It's what we were going to roll with, So I would be surprised if we won a few games, honestly.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to be a 38-win team. No. We'll be lucky if we're a 34-win team. So that pick probably will go to us. And what we need to do is we need to start looking at our draft.
Yep, that'll be some upcoming videos for us.
Yes, it will. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the Full Court Press podcast. We're your hosts, JD and Doc D. Catch us next time. Stay weird.
Watching another episode of the Full Court Press NBA podcast. For the full podcast, click the link below and subscribe for more hoops content.